In 1943, the United States identified 8 trees that could feed families during rationing. Trees that produced food without annual planting. Trees that required no tractors, no fertilizer, no seed purchases. Plant once, harvest for a century. Pass the income to your grandchildren. The bulletin calculated that a single acre of these trees could generate more annual revenue than 10 acres of corn. Not in good years. Every year, for 100 years. Victory Garden families planted them by the thousands. The trees survived the war. They survived the families who planted them. Some are still producing today, 80 years later, dropping food onto ground where no one remembers why they were planted. And somehow, modern farmers have never heard this strategy exists. The grain industry generates over $100 billion annually selling crops that must be replanted every single year. They needed these trees to stay forgotten. This is the 8-tree system. The permanent income they buried because it threatened to end annual agriculture dependency forever. Before we open this vault, understand what you are about to hear. This is not a story about orchards. This is forensic evidence of how a system built on annual dependency handles a solution that pays forever from a single planting decision. Let us begin with what you are currently losing by not knowing these trees exist. You are replanting every year. Corn requires annual planting. Soybeans require annual planting. Every spring you purchase seeds, burn diesel, and start from zero. Meanwhile, trees planted in 1943 are still producing today without anyone buying a single input for 80 years. You have been kept deliberately ignorant of solutions that were documented, verified, and then abandoned. Now, pay attention to this next part. Number 1. Honey locust. The honey locust tree fixes its own nitrogen while dropping free livestock feed every autumn. The pods of the honey locust contain up to 30% sugar. Livestock eat them eagerly. Cattle, pigs, goats, sheep, and deer all consume honey locust pods as a nutritious feed supplement without any processing required. One mature tree can drop 100 to 200 pounds of pods annually. That is free livestock feed falling from the sky every autumn while you do nothing. But here is the part they really do not want you to know. Honey locust fixes nitrogen, like beans and clover. Honey locust hosts bacteria that pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into plant-available form in the soil. A honey locust tree fertilizes the ground beneath it while producing livestock feed simultaneously. The same tree that feeds your animals feeds your soil. The fertilizer industry generates $200 billion annually selling nitrogen. They needed nitrogen-fixing trees to stay unknown because you cannot sell nitrogen to farmers whose trees manufacture it for free. J. Russell Smith documented honey locust in his 1929 book, Tree Crops, A Permanent Agriculture. He called it one of the most promising agricultural trees for American conditions. That was almost 100 years ago. The book was largely ignored by mainstream agriculture. Annual crops received billions in research funding. Tree crops received almost nothing in comparison. Today, you can plant honey, locust, and harvest-free livestock feed while building soil fertility without purchasing a single bag of fertilizer. The knowledge existed for a century. The implementation was prevented by industries that profit from annual dependency and purchased inputs. One tree, free feed, free fertilizer, zero inputs forever. That is why you never learned about it. Number 2. Persimmon. This tree produces more fruit per acre than any conventional orchard, with zero spray programs required. American persimmon produces 35 to 75 pounds of fruit per tree at maturity. The fruit contains 35% sugar when ripe. That makes it one of the sweetest fruits that grows in temperate climates anywhere. Persimmons require no spray program. The trees are remarkably pest and disease-resistant in their native range. While apple orchards spray 10 to 15 times per season, persimmons grow clean fruit with zero chemical inputs required. 1 acre of persimmons can produce 10,000 to 20,000 pounds of fruit annually at full production. Fresh market persimmons sell for $2 to $4 per pound. Value-added products like persimmon pulp, dried persimmons, and persimmon wine command higher prices still. But the real secret is the wildlife value. Persimmons are the preferred food of deer, turkey, and virtually every other game species in eastern North America. Hunting leases on properties with mature persimmons command premium prices over properties without them. The tree pays you in fruit. It pays you in hunting access. It pays you in wildlife that neighbors without persimmons simply do not have. For 100 years, from a single planting, the pesticide industry generates $84 billion annually. They cannot sell spray programs to farmers, growing pest-free fruit from trees that require nothing. Most fruit production requires constant intervention, constant spraying, constant management, constant expense. Persimmons produce in abundance while asking for nothing in return except ground to stand in. One tree, spray-free fruit, hunting income, wildlife abundance. A century of production from a single planting decision. The pesticide industry needed you growing apples instead. Number 3. Mulberry. Mulberry produces edible fruit for humans. It also produces leaves that are 15 to 25% protein, making them one of the most valuable livestock feeds that grows on trees anywhere. In Asia, mulberry has fed silkworms for 5,000 years, but the leaves feed any livestock. Cattle eat mulberry leaves, goats devour them, rabbits thrive on them, chickens consume them eagerly. Fish in aquaculture systems grow faster on mulberry leaf meal than on commercial feed. One tree producing human food and animal feed simultaneously. 2 income streams from a single organism. The fruit ripens over an extended period, providing fresh harvest for weeks rather than a single, overwhelming glut that must be processed immediately. The leaves can be harvested multiple times per season without harming the tree. The more you cut, the more it grows in response. Stay with me because this changes everything about how you should see integrated systems. A mulberry tree drops fruit for your family. The leaves feed your livestock. The livestock fertilize the ground. The ground grows more mulberries. A closed loop, no inputs, no dependency, no annual checks to corporations. The feed industry cannot sell you products when your trees produce feed. The fruit industry cannot sell you produce when your trees drop berries. The fertilizer industry cannot sell you inputs when your livestock cycles nutrients. The system feeds itself while it feeds you. One tree threatening 3 industries simultaneously: human food, animal feed, and soil fertility from a single planting. That is why mulberry is considered a weed in many American jurisdictions. When something threatens industries, it gets classified as a problem. Number 4. A pecan tree lives and produces for 300 years. That is not a typo. 3 centuries of harvest from a single planting decision made today. The trees your great-grandfather could have planted would still be producing now. The trees you plant today will still be producing when no one alive remembers your name. Mature pecan trees produce 50 to 500 pounds of nuts per tree annually depending on variety and management. Premium pecans sell for $6 to $12 per pound retail. One mature tree can generate $500 to $2,000 in annual revenue. 1 acre holds 12 to 20 trees at mature spacing. The math becomes generational wealth that compounds across centuries. Georgia and Texas understood this. They planted pecans a century ago. Those trees still produce. Those families still profit today from decisions made before they were born. The rest of the country was taught to plant corn. Corn dies every year. Corn creates annual customers for seeds, fertilizer, and equipment. Pecans create 300-year income streams, 300 years of revenue from one planting, no annual inputs, no corporate dependency. The seed industry, the fertilizer industry, and the equipment industry combined cannot allow that comparison to reach farmers making planting decisions, so they made sure it never did. Every agricultural school teaches corn. Almost none teach pecans. Every extension office promotes annual crops. Almost none promote permanent tree systems. The education follows the money. The money comes from industries selling annual inputs. 300 years of production threatens every annual revenue model in agriculture. That is why you were never taught to plant pecans. Number 5. Hazelnut. The hazelnut tree produces more profit per acre than any annual crop, with almost no ongoing work required. Hazelnuts produce $3,000 to $6,000 per acre annually at mature production. Corn produces $500 to $800. The comparison is not close by any measure. 1 acre of hazelnuts generates 5 to 10 times more income than 1 acre of corn, every year for 50 years. With no annual planting costs, no seed purchases, no equipment passes through your fields. But the numbers tell only part of the story. Hazelnuts begin producing in year 3 to 4 after planting. Full production arrives by year 8 to 10. Once established, the same bushes produce for half a century with minimal management required. Compare that to corn. Year 1 of corn. Buy seed, buy fertilizer, burn diesel, hope for good weather, harvest, start over. Year 1 of hazelnuts. Plant once. Year 50 of corn. Buy seed, buy fertilizer, burn diesel, hope for good weather, harvest, start over again. Year 50 of hazelnuts. Harvest nuts from the same plants you put in the ground 50 years ago. The hazelnut farmer at year 50 is harvesting from zero-input plants. The corn farmer at year 50 has written 50 years of checks to seed companies, fertilizer manufacturers, and equipment dealers. Multiply those checks by 50 years. That is the money the hazelnut system would have kept in your family instead of sending to corporations. Oregon grows most American hazelnuts because someone there understood this math decades ago. The rest of the country was kept dependent on annual crops because annual crops create annual customers who must return every spring. Hazelnuts create freedom. Annual crops create dependency. Number 6. American chestnut. The one they erased most aggressively because it threatened the most industries simultaneously. Before 1900, 4 billion American chestnut trees dominated the eastern forests. Not million, billion. 1 in every 4 hardwood trees was a chestnut. They fed wildlife, they fed livestock, they fed families, they built entire regional economies on a single species. The nuts contain 40% carbohydrates with significant protein. They could be eaten fresh, roasted, dried, or ground into flour. Communities that lived beneath chestnut forests never experienced famine. Appalachian families called it the bread tree. Then the blight arrived. By 1950, the 4 billion trees were functionally extinct. The greatest food-producing forest in North American history was gone. Here is what they do not tell you. Blight-resistant varieties now exist. Chinese-American hybrids carry resistance genes while maintaining the productivity of the original trees. The American Chestnut Foundation has been breeding resistant varieties for decades. You can plant chestnuts again. A mature chestnut tree produces 50 to 100 pounds of nuts annually. 1 acre of chestnuts can yield 2,000 to 3,000 pounds per year. At current prices of $3 to $5 per pound, that is $6,000 to $15,000 per acre. Every year, for a century, corn generates $500 to $800 per acre in a good year. Chestnuts generate 10 times more while requiring no annual inputs whatsoever. The grain industry generates over $100 billion annually. They needed the chestnut to stay forgotten. They needed you believing that annual crops are the only viable option. The tree that fed America for 10,000 years is available for planting today. You were simply never told it had returned from extinction. Number 7. Black walnut. During the war, black walnut wood was classified as strategic material. Gun stocks, airplane propellers, military equipment required walnuts. Unique combination of strength and workability. The government paid premium prices for walnut timber from private land. What they did not advertise was the dual income stream. Black walnut produces nuts for 50 to 100 years. Then the timber sells for $50,000 to $200,000 per tree, depending on quality and size. Let that number land, a single tree. 1 acre holds 20 to 40 walnut trees at mature spacing. The timber value of a mature walnut plantation can exceed $2 million per acre. Your grandchildren inherit generational wealth from trees you planted decades earlier. The nut production alone generates $1,000 to $3,000 per acre annually while the timber grows. You are paid while you wait for the final payout. No annual crop offers anything comparable. Corn pays once and dies. Soybeans pay once and die. Black walnut pays every year for a century and then pays one final time in amounts that change family trajectories forever. Banks profit from annual operating loans. Equipment dealers profit from annual machinery needs. Seed companies profit from annual purchases made every single spring. A tree that pays for 100 years and then delivers generational wealth creates no repeat customers for anyone. That is precisely why you were never taught to plant them in agricultural education. The black walnut offers income while living and fortune when harvested. No annual crop in existence matches that combination of returns. Number 8. The oak. For 10,000 years before industrial agriculture, humans relied on acorns as a staple food. Indigenous peoples across North America processed millions of pounds annually. European peasants survived famines on acorn flour. Asian cultures developed sophisticated acorn processing traditions spanning centuries. The nutrition is substantial. Acorns contain carbohydrates, fats, and protein in caloric densities comparable to cultivated grains. But the real value in modern systems is not human food. It is acorn-finished pork. Iberian ham, the most expensive cured meat on earth, comes from pigs fattened on acorns. Jamon Iberico sells for $100 to $200 per pound at retail. The pigs that produce it eat nothing but acorns and grass for the final months before slaughter. American pigs fed on acorns develop the same fat marbling, the same flavor profile, the same premium potential that commands extraordinary prices. Standard commodity pork sells for $3 per pound at wholesale. Acorn-finished pork sells for $15 to $30 per pound at premium markets. That is a 5 to 10 times price increase from feeding pigs what falls free from trees. One mature oak produces 500 to 1,000 pounds of acorns annually. Those acorns convert to premium pork that commands prices commodity operations cannot touch, regardless of their scale. The industrial pork industry generates over $20 billion annually selling cheap meat from confinement operations. They needed acorn silvopasture to stay invisible because they cannot compete with free feed producing premium product. Every oak tree on your property is a feed source you have been taught to ignore and often remove. The most profitable pig feed falls free from trees. Now, let me show you what this means when you combine all 8 trees into a single system. Chestnuts, producing carbohydrate trich nuts for human consumption and livestock feed. Black walnuts, generating annual nut income plus century-end timber wealth. Hazelnuts delivering 5 to 10 times corn income with 0 annual inputs. Oaks dropping free livestock feed that converts to premium pork. Honey locust fixing nitrogen while providing sweet pods for animals. Persimmons producing spray-free fruit plus hunting lease income. Mulberries feeding both family and livestock from the same tree. Pecans generating income for 300 years from one decision. 8 trees, 8 income streams, 1 planting. A farmer running this system would need almost nothing from the industries that dominate modern agriculture. No annual seed purchases, no synthetic fertilizer, no pesticide programs, no equipment loans, no operating credit, independence. That word terrifies every corporation that profits from your annual dependency. The average American farm carries $150,000 to $250,000 in debt. That debt exists because annual agriculture requires annual borrowing. Plant, borrow, harvest, repay, repeat. Tree systems require one investment, then they pay. For a century, for 3 centuries, the knowledge never disappeared. It was only buried, and now you know where to dig. Every year you delay is a year of production you will never recover. Trees do not offer replays. The year you do not plant is a year that will never produce. Here is how this works. The algorithm is watching right now. It is deciding whether this reaches 100 people or 100,000. That decision is based almost entirely on what happens in the next 30 seconds. If you hit like, you are telling the system this matters. If you share this with a farmer still planting annual crops on ground that could support permanent income, you just handed them a key to a vault that was locked for 80 years. And if you subscribe and hit the bell, you are not following a channel. You are joining a list of people who refuse to let this knowledge get buried again. The next vault is already prepared. There is a root crop that produces 30 tons per acre, feeds 30 cows all winter from a single acre, stores itself in frozen ground. European armies survived on it when all other supplies failed. American farmers have never heard its name. That vault opens soon. Subscribe so you are there when it does. The seed industry they built requires your annual purchases to function. The equipment industry requires your annual field passes. The banking industry requires your annual borrowing. We are dismantling those dependencies 1 tree at a time. The next vault opens soon.